Hi, I'm Jim Storbeck, one of the founders of Initial Outfitters. Today, Alicia and I wanted to share a little bit about how we're feeding children around the world through our partnership with Charlie's Lunch, and along with the support of our consultants and their customers. It all started back in 2006 when we were first launching Initial Outfitters and talking about our dream. We wanted to provide women with the opportunity to build their own business, to reach their financial goals, and to make a difference in their lives. Secondly, we wanted to build a company that made a difference in the lives of children around the world. One of the things that makes Initial Outfitters unique is our core values include generosity and compassion. For us, charity is not an annual event, but it's rather woven into the fabric of who we are and what we do every day.
It is woven into what we do every day. And as we were starting Initial Outfitters, we were looking for the right ministry to partner with. And we heard the story of Charlie's Lunch and absolutely fell in love with that story. The story that we heard was missionaries, Sam and Janie Stewart, were working in Guatemala, and they had a son named Charlie who was born with very serious heart defects. And through his life, he had a lot of surgeries, but when he was in kindergarten, his first day of kindergarten, he went to kindergarten and his mom had packed him a lunch, and when she came to pick him up, the teacher said, "I have to tell you, Charlie didn't have lunch today." And he had a cupcake for lunch. And Janie said, "Well, I packed him a lunch." Well, he had made a new friend, Micah, who didn't have lunch that day. And Charlie had given him his lunch. And that was kind of the story of his life. He was a very, very giving child that loved to do for others. Well, as his life progressed, his heart was weaker and weaker and the surgeries weren't working. And one day his dad drove home and he was out in the yard playing with his dog and his heart just gave out. And he didn't make it to the hospital. And after the Stewarts had come home and grieved Charlie's loss, they went back to Guatemala, and they were at home one day and there was a knock at the door. And when they answered the door, there was these children there, and they were asking for a piece of bread. And Janie felt like she heard God telling her, "No, make them Charlie's lunch." And so she did. She went in her kitchen and she made them a lunch that would have been what she would have made for Charlie, and gave it to them, but they wouldn't stay and eat it. They left. They came back the next day with a couple more kids. And they came back the next day with a couple more. And what the Stewarts learned was that these children were children who were living in the streets. And they were taking those lunches that Janie was making them and taking them back to the other kids that they lived with to share them. And that was the beginning of Charlie's Lunch. And when we heard that story, we just knew this is something that we want to support, and it's something that all of our consultants, we believed at the time, and we know now to be true, we knew that all of our consultants would love being a part of this ministry as well. So that's how we got involved with Charlie's Lunch. So then the next question was, how do we get all our consultants involved? Because we didn't want this to just be a big corporate initiative. We wanted it to be something that really was a part of the heart of Initial Outfitters. So, as I like to tell everybody, I was getting ready for work one morning. I was curling my hair and talking to God about Charlie's Lunch and saying, how on earth can we get all of our consultants involved in this? And immediately the idea of Charlie's Lunchbox came, and I was so excited, couldn't wait to get to work. I was like, oh my gosh, we have the idea. If we're going to do Charlie's Lunchboxes, we can sell the lunchboxes. 100% of our profits can go to feed these lunchrooms. It's going to take 1,137 lunchboxes, and we'll be able to open a brand new Charlie's Lunchroom. So we got excited and we told our little bitty teeny tiny group of consultants that that's what we wanted to do. Well, they loved it. They were very excited. And we thought in 1 year we could sell 1,137 lunchboxes, because that really and truly was a big feat given the number of consultants we had at the time. 3 months later, we had sold 1,137 lunchboxes, and we were ready to open our first lunchroom. And by the end of that first year, we had 5 lunchrooms that we had been able to sponsor by the sales of those lunchboxes and by rounding up totals. And today we've got 12 or more lunchrooms that we're fully sponsoring in 5 different countries, and really looking to add a lot more to that. So it's something that, as we thought, our consultants would grab hold of and really be able to make a difference and know that they were making a difference. That's what it is today.
So true. And our first lunchroom was in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. And I remember when we flew down there and we met Sam Stewart, who's the founder of Charlie's Lunch. And as we were driving in towards that lunchroom, I saw all these dilapidated houses made of cinder block. And I thought, wow, our kids are coming from a really poor environment. But Sam said, no, these are not the houses where our kids are coming from. We've got to go further down the road. And as we went down the road, we came to an area near a levee, and we saw homes that were built with scrap pieces of wood tied together with wire, with scrap pieces of tin for roofs. And Sam said that these homes built on the levee were in constant danger of being flooded out, so the children always had to worry if a big rain came that they could lose what little bit they had. But our 60 kids that we have in this lunchroom come to church 3 times a week, and the cooks get there before they do, and they start making a delicious meal for them. And when they get there, they have a time of praise and worship where they sing songs and dance and do skits. And actually, we picked up a guitar and sang some songs along with them. It was a lot of fun. After they do the praise and worship, they have a time of devotion and Bible study. And then they get ready for lunch, and they go into a room, and they have big, long tables with chairs, and they get a delicious, nutritious meal that's well-balanced. It has things like rice and beans, chicken, tortillas, vegetables, and juice. It's just a really amazing time, and we got to serve the meals to the kids. It was just amazing. It felt like the Holy Spirit was present at the time. So what memories do you have?
Oh, wow. Tons. But one of the things about San Pedro Sula is the story of Daisy and her kids, Terasol and Saul. That's one that I love. When Charlie's Lunch team was down there first doing the survey of San Pedro Sula, they met Daisy, who was really in her last days of dying from AIDS. And she had 2 children, Terasol and Saul. And when the team went to meet with Daisy, they asked her if she knew Christ, and she didn't, but she accepted Christ that day. And a couple days later, they came back and they said, Daisy, we're excited to tell you that your kids have been accepted into the San Pedro Sula lunchroom. And 2 days later, Daisy died, but on that last day, she said, I can die in peace knowing that my kids have been accepted into this lunchroom. Well, we've been following Terasol and Saul for a long time, just watching them and knowing what's going on in their little lives. And about 1.5 years ago, we were told that they had left the lunchroom because their grandmother needed them to pick up bottles to help pay for the food that the family needed, and I guess the other things in the household. Well, Pastor Mary Pastora is a strong lady. And she marched herself over there to the grandmother's house, and she said, these kids need to be in the lunchroom, they need to be in church, and they need to be in school. And she convinced the grandmother to bring them back to the lunchroom. So they came back to the lunchroom, they continued to be fed, they continued to grow, they continued to learn, and now Terasol is in a school where she's learning a vocation. And she's going to have a future that is so much brighter.
So amazing.
Yeah, so much better than the future that she would have had. And that's just one of the ways that Charlie's Lunch is making a huge difference. Not just feeding them, lunch, but making a difference in their whole lives.
I agree, and I think one of my other favorite lunchrooms is in Cuernavaca, Mexico, in an area they call Zapata. It's an area where the government had relocated all the inner city prostitutes. And I remember as we drove in with Sam, we were in a van and the street was bumpy. And as we were bouncing around, the dust started coming up and the haze from all the heat was coming up. And I felt like I was just going into a movie, because all of a sudden, from nowhere, came hundreds and hundreds of children. And we thought, where are all these children coming from? And the area was just dilapidated again, with the pieces of wood for walls and the tin roofs. And we made our way to the end of the street, and lo and behold, there was a beautiful brick building which had been built by missionaries for Charlie's Lunch. And we got out of the car, and there was a big banner on the building that had the Charlie's Lunch logo and the Initial Outfitters logo, and it said, "Welcome." And we walked in, and there was someone dressed in a clown suit, and we walked up the steps and into the room, and there were 60 kids in a beautiful environment. It was clean. They were singing songs, and I just thought, wow, what an amazing oasis in just such a terrible place.
Yeah, I'll never forget that day when we looked out the door as they were just about to inaugurate the lunchroom, and there's this line of kids, hundreds it looked like, of kids out there, and they told us that 60 of those kids were our kids for the lunchroom. The other kids were kids whose parents wanted them to be part of the lunchroom, but they were on the waiting list. But it's a big deal. When a Charlie's Lunchroom comes to a community, it is a big, big deal. So yeah, and that lunchroom, I think for me too, is a really special lunchroom. They have really fallen in love with Initial Outfitters, and every time we've gone there to visit, they've always done something special for us, whether it's a big, huge poster with all of the kids' handprints on it that, you know, says "Thank you, Initial Outfitters," and that actually hung on our office wall for years, or some cards. Oh my goodness, the cards. I think I'm going to read a couple of those cards, because when I read those, I broke down in tears, just in tears, because it just came straight from those kids' hearts. Gracias. What I like about Charlie's Lunch is how they teach us and what they give us to eat. They teach us to sing and make bracelets and to color. There's another one from Salgado Zagal. Gracias for this Charlie's Lunchroom and for the help you've given us and for coming to visit us. I want to let you know that lots of kids come to this lunchroom and they're learning the Word of God. They give us yummy food, great desserts, and delicious fruit water. And this is the one that made me absolutely break down when I read it. But it's really these kids' reality. Gracias for starting these lunchrooms in Mexico. Thanks to you, a lot of kids who did not eat or who ate from the trash can eat here. Without you, they would still be collecting food from the garbage. So when that's the kind of thanks that you get for what you're doing, it really does motivate you to continue, because you see that it is making a difference for these kids. And Guatemala City, that's another cool lunchroom.
It really is. And you think you've heard it all before, but then you come to Guatemala City and here's another challenge. In Guatemala City, we have a lunchroom that's located in a ravine below an underpass. There's a large bridge that the locals call Suicide Bridge that runs over the top of where the kids live. And it's called Suicide Bridge because regularly somebody jumps to their death from the bridge because of the hard times that they're facing. And our kids see this. And even to make things worse, from time to time somebody jumps and lands on the roof of the church that houses our lunchroom. So the church decided to put a message on the top of the roof which says, "Stop, don't jump, Jesus loves you." How hard is that for our kids?
I don't know, but when that's the kind of despair that they're seeing every day, I don't know how they come out of that and how they really believe that there is hope for a different future. But in that lunchroom, is one of my favorite stories, because you know we could sit here and tell thousands of tragic stories that we've heard, and you know it would be heart-wrenching and really hard to listen to, but there's a lot of transformational stories too. Absolutely. And that's what's really motivating to me. There was this little boy, when they built the new schoolroom, which was built onto the church there, this little boy was talking to his teacher, and the teacher said, you know, look, this is going to be your school, and it's going to be your kids' school too. And the teacher was really excited about this, and the little boy said, it's going to be my school, but it's not going to be my kids' school. My kids are going to have a different future. And it just, to me, that's just so amazing, because he had been able to see, because of the love and the support and the encouragement and the you can do it and there is hope and you can be whoever you want to be, that he's getting in that lunchroom. He believes that there's hope for a future and for something different for him. And I love stories like that.
I do too.
So, you know, when Charlie's Lunch comes to a community, it really is transformational for that community. They do a survey. They bring in 60 of the neediest children in the entire community, and only 20% of those kids can be from the church. The other 80% have to be from families that are not part of the church. That's because it's an evangelical outreach for the community. And that's very intentional, because as much as the mission is to feed those children physically and spiritually, it's also to reach that community and change the face of the community for Christ. And that's, you know, that's what's happening. They're bringing hope, and they're bringing love, and they're changing the face of it. They really are. Those kids, they understand that there's a different life for them. They have self-worth. They come to that lunchroom early. They help get ready. They help set up the chairs and the tables and help in the kitchen whatever they can. They help clean up after it's all done. And they do that because they feel like they have a purpose now. You know, whatever that little project is, it's a purpose for them. And they're receiving that attaboy and attagirl that they're not getting at home. And it's making a huge, huge difference all around. When we say that every consultant can make a difference, that really, really is the truth. You know, you heard me say earlier that just one lunchbox feeds a child for an entire month. So when a consultant sells one lunchbox, they've impacted a child for a month. When they sell 15 lunchboxes, you've taken care of a child for a year. An entire year, 15 lunchboxes. People can do that in one party. When they tell this story, it really is amazing how many lunchboxes people are selling. Today, 858 lunchboxes will re-sponsor a lunchroom for an entire year. You heard me say 1,137 earlier. That was to build a brand new lunchroom with the kitchen and the kitchen equipment and the plates and cups and all the things that you need. But 858 lunchboxes, and we've actually had consultants individually do that, or as a team do that. So it's something where we know people have felt a lot of satisfaction knowing that they've found a way to make a real and meaningful difference. So you can do this by selling lunchboxes, by selling our Charlie's Lunch cookbook. We have some other items that we introduce from time to time that we use to sponsor children. And we also do this by rounding up totals. We ask that you round up your total for every single customer. Ask them, would you like to round up your total? Because when they round up that total, whether it's 1 cent or whether they decide to be really generous and round it up $10.32, whatever they do, when those totals add up at the end of the year, we always sponsor more than one lunchroom. Fully sponsor more than one lunchroom just off of rounding up totals. We call that lunch money.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it really is awesome. And then we have a project that's called Lunchbox Love, where our consultants decide to partner with a local ministry or school or some organization that can benefit and be blessed by the donation of lunchboxes. So we're feeding our children and we're also blessing local organizations. There's a lot of different ways that we've incorporated this into Initial Outfitters. And we also sponsor all of our children for Christmas through Charlie's Christmas. And that's a $20 sponsorship. And our goal every single year is to get every single one of those children sponsored for Christmas. And boy, it's a celebration when we hit that mark. So we've had a lot of fun incorporating this into Initial Outfitters, and our consultants have too. It's a really fantastic way to make a difference.
That's so true, Alicia. Whether you are just considering joining Initial Outfitters or you've recently started, we hope you can see how you can make a difference in the lives of these children by promoting Charlie's Lunch at your parties.
Yeah, we're really excited to see how each new outfitter decides to make a difference through Charlie's Lunch, and we can't wait to see how you do. You know, it is something that's very personal, and everyone incorporates it into their business in their own way. And we wanted to share with you just really quickly to recap the ways that you can make a difference with Charlie's Lunch and for Charlie's Lunch. The simplest, most frequent way that you can do this is by asking every single customer to round up their total. And that's a very simple conversation. It's on your order form. All you have to do as you're filling out your order form is say, would you like to round up your total for Charlie's Lunch? And then your customer says, what's Charlie's Lunch? And if you haven't already shared at your party what Charlie's Lunch is, you can share it with them right then. But it's a very simple thing to say, well, we're feeding children all around the world. Okay, so that's one way, rounding up your total. You can also collect lunch money. You can sell lunches. And we sell those in quantities of 5, 10, 30, 50, 100. Somebody can sponsor a child for a month, a year. They can sponsor a lunchroom for a day, for a month, for a year. We have all of those different item numbers already in the system. So if they want to be more generous, they can do that. And a lot of people do. A lot of people do. And between those two things, the lunch money and rounding up totals.
And selling the lunch boxes.
Yeah, but just with the lunch money and rounding up totals, we sponsor more than a lunchroom a year.
Wow.
So then the next thing is the lunch boxes and the cookbooks. 100% of our profit goes directly to feeding our kids. So every penny that Initial Outfitters would earn is given to Charlie's Lunch off of those two items. So that's another thing that you can promote very easily and very effectively, because everybody needs a lunchbox. Everybody knows somebody who needs a lunchbox, and it doesn't just have to be used for lunch.
And they're great lunchboxes.
They are. They're great. And then the other thing that you can do is from time to time we have seasonal products. We have a monogrammed cross. We have different things that we offer that sponsor our children. We also run a Lunchbox Love projects. These are projects where the consultant identifies a local group, and that is a group that would benefit from receiving lunch boxes. It might be a children's hospital, it might be a school backpack program. There's a number of different types of organizations that consultants have partnered with. They find sponsors for those lunch boxes. The lunch boxes are then donated to that organization, and usually they're filled with all sorts of goodies that would relate to the recipient of the lunchbox. And that way it's a double blessing, because our kids are being fed from Initial Outfitters profits, and the local organization is being blessed by the donation of the lunch boxes. So it's really a wonderful double whammy there with the Lunchbox Love program.
Sure, yes.
Yeah. And then we also have Charlie's Christmas, where every single year we try to sponsor every single child for Charlie's Christmas. And for most of those kids, that's the only wrapped gift they'll get all year long. So it's something that makes an impact, a very meaningful impact, because the kids remember that. You know, they know somebody loved them, loved them enough to sponsor them for Christmas, get them a wrapped gift, their family invited to the Christmas dinner, family walks home with a box of staples that they can make their own Christmas dinner with. It's an amazing program, and we're thrilled to sponsor that every year. So now that you've heard all of this, I can't wait to see how you decide to incorporate Charlie's Lunch into your business and make a difference with us for Charlie's Lunch and for all of these kids around the world.
Absolutely. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for your support.